when three leather-clad bikers rolled into my driveway and trapped my pregnant wife between their Harleys and the trunk of her car. I knew instantly this wasn't random road rage. This was a message, and the sender was standing across the street pretending to water her roses. That sender was Victoria Langford, 52 years old, real estate agent, six-term unopposed president of the Cedar Ridge Community Association, and self-crowned queen of our cul-de-sac. She watched the scene unfold with this smug, entertained little smile, phone in hand like she might start recording if my wife cried. I was at the kitchen window, coffee halfway to my lips, watching Riley, my wife, 7 months pregnant, one hand resting on her stomach, the other clutching a torn grocery bag, as the biggest biker stepped in so close she had to lean against the car. His skull bandana, faded tattoos, beer gut, and fake tough guy stare would have been comical if my child wasn't inside that woman he was cornering. "Your husband's causing problems for this community," he said, clearly reading a rehearsed line. "There's going to be consequences for noncompliance." Most people would crack, cry, plead, but Riley is a pediatric nurse at St. Gabriel Children's Hospital. She's walked families through their worst nights, so instead of melting down, she bent slowly, picked up the spilled groceries, straightened her back, gave them a look that said, "You're not worth my heartbeat," and walked into our house, shoulders squared, chin high. She called me the second the door latched. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the adrenaline in the silence between words. "I think our HOA problem just got promoted to something else," she said. "My name is Cole Harding, 45, former logistics coordinator for military contractors in places where if you misread a power move, people don't get fined, they get buried. 6 months earlier, we bought a $495,000 corner lot in Cedar Ridge Meadows, a neighborhood so pretty it almost looked fake. Manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, dog bag stations everywhere, kids riding scooters in straight lines. What the real estate brochure never shows you is the fine print, the covenants, and the one person who knows how to weaponize them. That person here was Victoria. She lived in the largest house in the development, stone front, 3-car garage, private drive, and somehow also ran the HOA that controlled everyone else's property, fees, and peace of mind. Our first clash had started small. While everyone else poured water into perfect green carpets, I had installed drought-resistant native landscaping, the exact type the county water department recommends. 2 days after the last plant was in the ground, Victoria showed up with a violation notice. Unapproved landscaping materials. Military habit kicked in. I spent 3 days buried in the Cedar Ridge governing documents, county codes, state conservation rules. My yard wasn't just allowed, it was basically their poster child. I filed a formal appeal with attached citations and a letter from the county water office. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the starter pistol. Suddenly, I was getting weekly violation notices. Fence height, excessive, though it matched half the neighborhood. Mailbox, out of compliance, though it was identical to my neighbor's. Tree trimming, mandatory, for branches that didn't exist on their own maps. The people who never got notices? Victoria's friends. Our elderly neighbor Evelyn Marsh had racked up $8,000 in fines over a single cement gnome. The young tech couple across from us, Liam and Harper Cho, were being harassed over solar panels that actually boosted property values. It was never about rules, it was about control. I installed cameras to protect Riley, then to track patterns. Footage showed HOA board members slowly cruising by, snapping photos like they were building a criminal file, all over a yard full of wildflowers and gravel. At night, Riley would ask in a tired voice, "Can't we just plant a strip of grass and let it go?" And I kept thinking about every bully I'd met in uniformed and ununiformed versions, how backing down once just teaches them you're an easy target, how the next family might not be as stubborn or as prepared. So I told her, if we cave, this never stops, it just moves on. Then came the emergency meeting. Victoria called a weekday board session at 2 p.m., right when Riley was at the hospital and I was at physical therapy for an old shoulder injury. With 3 of her loyalists, she passed a motion slapping us with a $2,500 fine plus $50 a day until we ripped out the landscaping. 12 minutes, start to finish. The problem for her was, I'd read every one of those 80-something pages of covenants. Buried in the legal soup, a clause required 72 hours notice for emergency meetings. She'd given 48. That whole vote had the legal weight of a doodle on a napkin. I wrote a formal challenge that night, cited their own hierarchy of documents, state law, meeting requirements, sent certified copies to every board member, the management company, and kept time-stamped digital backups. Meeting invalid. Fine void. Then I dug deeper and found the real rot. Victoria had updated HOA bylaws twice in the last 18 months without proper homeowner approval, specifically the sections about increasing fines beyond $100. That meant a year and a half of penalties were, legally, smoke. I drafted letters for all 129 households, explained in simple language how their president had been overstepping, attached copies of the illegal amendments, and offered to help anyone challenge their fines. Within 2 days, my driveway had become a waiting room of angry, exhausted neighbors with folders of violation notices and stories that all sounded the same. That was when Victoria stopped hiding behind paper and started hiring muscle. At exactly 7 a.m. one Tuesday, a white Ford Explorer with Sentinel Residential Services magnets rolled to the curb opposite my house. 2 guys in matching polos and sunglasses sat there, engines idling, pretending to be security. A bit of digging confirmed Sentinel was owned by Greg Langford, Victoria's brother-in-law. Their contract described a behavior modification presence, which is a polished way of saying, we'll stalk whoever you tell us to until they snap or move. These guards followed Evelyn as she watered her flowers, asked Liam and Harper invasive questions about their equipment, and the final straw for me, sat in their SUV, watching while Riley hurried to her car before night shifts, key fob in one hand, the other resting unconsciously on her swollen belly. One of the guards, Josh, walked like a veteran, back straight, scan automatic. One morning on my run, I opened with something you only say if you've been there, named a base, a unit, a place that smells like burning sand and metal. His expression changed. Over a few casual conversations, he started talking. He showed me photos from patrols, grown men towering over fragile widows, 2 guards boxing in Liam and Harper on the sidewalk, following families to their cars. He mentioned, almost offhand, that Sentinel had subcontracted more serious intimidation to a local biker club, the Iron Vipers, run by Victoria's nephew, Logan Pierce, a guy with a fraud record and too much attitude for someone still living off his mother. A few nights later, my camera picked up Victoria meeting Logan behind the community center. My directional mic caught every word. She handed him an envelope, told him, whatever it takes to get them out. That family needs to know they're not welcome here. He promised to make sure they get the message. That recording changed the mission. This wasn't about fees anymore. This was about my wife, my child, my home. The hit landed on a Thursday morning. I was at physical therapy. Riley was unloading groceries, humming to herself, moving slow, one hand on her belly. 3 Harleys screamed into the driveway and boxed her in. Logan, Brick, and Nate played their parts, circling, leaning in too close, parroting lines about your husband's noncompliance and serious consequences. Riley did what we talked about in every worst-case scenario. She observed, memorized faces, kept her voice level, broke contact as soon as she could, moved inside, locked the door, wrote everything down, then called me. On the drive home, I let the anger spike, then forced it down into something sharper. 3 minutes, 3 phone calls. First, Sergeant Dan Keller at State Patrol, an old contact, running the plates. Second, Assistant District Attorney Monica Rhodes, who handles gang-related intimidation. Third, Cal Benson, a private investigator who'd made a career out of pulling threads on dangerous people. By mid-afternoon, the picture was clear. Logan had an active warrant for unpaid child support. Brick was violating parole. Nate had skipped mandatory anger management sessions. 3 men, 3 separate legal leashes, now in the right hands. At 3:17 p.m., I got a call from county lockup. Logan's girlfriend begged me, through tears, to make whatever this is stop. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. This time the Harleys were nowhere in sight. Brick and Nate stood on the porch in street clothes, shoulders slumped, boots suddenly too heavy. Look, man, Brick said, voice stripped of bravado. We're here to apologize. Logan's inside. His girl said you might help if we tell you everything. I let them sweat a moment, then opened the door wider. We're going to record, I said. If that's a problem, leave now. They stayed. In that hour they gave me the entire script. Victoria had hired Logan for $500 cash to intimidate my wife while I was gone, making it clear she wanted a pregnant woman terrified enough to pressure her husband into surrendering. They even described the envelope, the meeting behind the community center, the exact words she'd used. I recorded every second with their consent, made sure they agreed to testify if needed, then told Monica they were cooperating. I wasn't interested in ruining small lives to protect a big one. I wanted the architect. Word about Logan's arrest spread through Cedar Ridge Meadows like wildfire. For the first time, Victoria's aura of untouchable authority cracked. Neighbors who used to glance away from her now stared openly through their blinds. Fear was still there, but curiosity had joined it. She had escalated from fines to hired intimidation. I was about to escalate from letters to something much, much bigger. While Victoria frantically tried to regain control, I did what a logistics guy does best. I followed every piece of paper to its endpoint. A Freedom of Information request to City Planning produced the original development agreement for Cedar Ridge Meadows. It required that 15% of lots be reserved for moderate-income housing, homes for nurses, teachers, firefighters. In a 90-home development, that meant at least 13 affordable units. Victoria's company had built exactly zero. Instead, she'd promised $700,000 in lieu fees. City records showed 3 years of unpaid notices, ignored like spam. Working with Evelyn and a hired forensic accountant, we followed the HOA money trail. Legitimate administrative costs were supposed to be about $50,000 a year. Over 6 years, nearly $500,000 had gone to Langford Property Services, her shell company, paying for phantom landscaping, fake, emergency contracts, and charges that lined up suspiciously well with her vacations and car payments. We formed a quiet coalition at my dining room table. Judith Kane, retired attorney hungry for a good fight, drafted legal strategies. Eric Mendoza, former city council member, mapped out which agencies to notify and how to time our complaints. Evelyn balanced ledgers like a forensic surgeon. Liam and Harper handled digital security, building a lockdown database and a presentation even a distracted neighbor could understand. We filed with the state attorney general, the IRS, the city, and the state HOA oversight board, all within days of each other. No escape hatch. Sensing something, Victoria launched one more big play, a special emergency assessment of $5,000 per household to create a legal defense fund. She painted us as radicals, terrorists against property values, and scheduled the vote with minimal notice. At that meeting, with the community center packed, Evelyn stood up, cardigan and all, and asked, in that deceptively soft voice, for a full independent audit before anyone agreed to pay another cent. The room inhaled as one. People who'd never questioned a balance sheet suddenly wanted to see one. The assessment crashed and burned. From there, Victoria spiraled. Anonymous code complaints against anyone who'd attended our coalition meetings. Rumors that I was under federal investigation. A restraining order attempt based on doctored audio clips of me allegedly threatening her. What she didn't count on was that my cameras had captured every real interaction we'd ever had. Our forensic audio expert dismantled her fake recordings in minutes. The judge not only tossed the restraining order, but openly suggested she might face charges for filing false reports. Her last desperate move was to run to the media. Channel 9 Action News called me, saying they'd spoken to a frightened HOA president being terrorized by a veteran. I emailed them our evidence file in response. Their tune changed. "Can we bring cameras to your community meeting?" they asked. We booked St. Mark's Fellowship Hall when Victoria tried to shut down the school auditorium. It didn't matter. People were coming anyway. That night, over 300 residents packed into the hall. Councilmember Dana Price sat up front, legal pad ready. Detective Raul Vega from Financial Crimes leaned against the wall. Channel 9 set up cameras, lights, mics. On stage with me was Riley, now 8 months pregnant, hand resting on her belly, eyes bright but tired. I looked out over the room, felt weeks of tension settle into a solid, clear line of purpose, and started talking. We showed 6 years of budgets versus actuals, line by line, until the number at the bottom of the screen, $487,000 diverted to Langford Property Services, hung in the air like smoke. We played the recording of Victoria paying Logan to intimidate my family. We displayed the development agreement, the unbuilt affordable homes, the unpaid city fees. The crowd shifted from confusion to outrage to something stronger, unity. Victoria finally snapped, stood up, and screamed that we were all too stupid to understand complex finances, that I was a dangerous radical, that she was the victim. That was the moment she lost the last person who still wanted to believe her. Evelyn stood, took the microphone, and said, "Honey, this isn't complex. This is theft." Witnesses followed. Liam and Harper, Evelyn, Brick and Nate via video, Bryce, one of her old allies, confessing that he'd been threatened into silence and handing over emails where Victoria coached him on hiding irregularities. Finally, Detective Vega stepped forward, badge catching the light. "Ms. Victoria Langford," he said, voice carrying across the hall. "Based on the evidence gathered and the investigations currently underway, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit harassment, and filing false reports." The sound of handcuffs closing around her wrists felt like a door finally locking on 6 years of fear. As she was led past neighbors she'd bullied, she screamed about witch hunts. Nobody followed her out. We voted that night to dissolve the old board, elect an interim one with strict transparency, require annual audits, and open the books to every homeowner. 6 months later, I pushed my 8-week-old daughter, Grace, in a stroller through what used to be Victoria's perfectly groomed backyard. Her foreclosed house had been bought by our new HOA using recovered funds and turned into the Cedar Ridge Community Center. Her lawn was now a demonstration garden of native plants, the same kind that had started this war. In court, Judge Karen Whitmore sentenced Victoria to 8 years in minimum security prison and ordered full restitution plus penalties that will keep her paying back our community for a long time. Logan got 18 months and years of community service, teaching motorcycle safety to teens on the edge of the same bad choices he'd made. Statewide, Senator Alicia Grant used our case as the example behind the Neighborhood Association Transparency Act, mandating audits and open records. Other communities started calling me, asking for help. Riley jokes, I went from supply routes in war zones to HOA battlefields, from convoys to cul-de-sacs. Maybe she's right. But the real victory isn't in the headlines or laws. It's in the way Cedar Ridge Meadows feels now, lighter, friendlier, alive. Kids chalk in the street without parents worrying about letters in the mail, neighbors share tools instead of rumors, and when someone suggests a change, they ask, they don't threaten. Here's what I know now, clearer than any mission briefing. Bullies don't thrive because they're powerful. They thrive because good people are tired, busy, scared, and alone. All it takes to start the end of their reign is one person willing to read the fine print, gather evidence, and say, "No more," out loud. So let me ask you this, honestly. If your HOA president, or your boss, or your neighborhood tyrant started using fear, threats, and lies to control your life, would you pay the unfair bill to keep the peace? Or would you risk everything comfortable to fight for what's right? And in your heart, where's the line between revenge and justice? And on which side do you think I stood when 3 bikers tried to scare a pregnant woman in my driveway?